Life's deepest truths aren't found in textbooks or viral quotes. They're etched in the wrinkles of those who've lived them. Today, we uncover 7 gentle lessons only time can teach. Hard-earned wisdom from elders who've navigated love, loss, and everything in between. Get ready to hear the kind of life-changing insights that come not from theories, but from decades of actually living. 1. Happiness is a daily practice, not a destination. The pursuit of happiness has fooled generations into believing it's something to be caught, like a butterfly in a net. We imagine it waits for us in some future moment, when we get the promotion, when we retire, when we finally lose those last 10 pounds. But the elderly, those who have lived through wars and recessions, through heartbreak and triumph, know the secret. Happiness is not something you find, but something you practice. True contentment reveals itself in the quiet moments we too often overlook. It's in the way sunlight filters through kitchen curtains in the morning. It's in the familiar weight of a well-worn book in your hands. It's in the shared silence between old friends who no longer need words to communicate. The elderly understand that happiness isn't about changing your circumstances, but about changing your perspective on the circumstances you already have. Consider the woman who finds joy in her daily tea ritual, not because the tea is extraordinary, but because she's decided to make it so. Or the man who takes pleasure in watching birds at his feeder, seeing in their simple existence a mirror of life's uncomplicated beauty. These aren't grand moments, but they contain all the grandeur life requires. The lesson here is profound yet simple. Happiness isn't about having what you want, but wanting what you have. It's not the absence of problems, but the ability to coexist with them peacefully. Those who have lived longest know that the secret isn't in accumulating more, but appreciating what's already there. This truth becomes more evident with each passing year. The elderly smile not because their lives have been easy, but because they've learned to extract sweetness even from bitter experiences. Their laughter lines tell stories of choosing joy despite sorrow, of finding light in darkness. This is the first great truth. Happiness is always available if only we choose to see it. Grief is love's shadow. Permanent but changing grief is not something you overcome, but something you learn to carry. The elderly know this better than anyone. They've stood at gravesides, held fading hands in hospital rooms, and kept vigil for those who would never wake again. Yet they continue forward, not because the pain has disappeared, but because they've learned to make space for it in their lives. The shape of grief changes with time. At first, it's a boulder that crushes your chest, making each breath an effort. Then it becomes a stone in your pocket, always present, always noticeable, but no longer debilitating. Eventually, it transforms into a locket you wear close to your heart, a weight you've learned to bear because it represents a love too precious to forget. Those who have lived longest understand that mourning never truly ends. It simply evolves. The sharp stabs of early loss soften into dull aches, then into tender remembrances. What was once unbearable becomes familiar, then eventually sacred. The elderly don't stop missing those they've lost. They simply develop a different relationship with that missing. This transformation isn't automatic. It requires conscious work. It comes from speaking their names aloud, from telling their stories, from honoring their memory in small daily rituals. The widow who still sets a place at the table isn't deluded. She's practicing a sacred remembrance. The grandfather who tells his grandchildren about their ancestors isn't dwelling in the past. He's keeping love alive across generations. The final wisdom here is this. Grief is not the opposite of love, but its continuation. The depth of your sorrow is equal to the depth of your love. And while the pain may change, the love never does. This is why the elderly can speak of loss with both tears and smiles, because they understand that true love transcends even death. Kindness compounds. Over a lifetime, in youth, we imagine legacy in terms of grand accomplishments and visible achievements. But with age comes the realization that what truly endures, are the small acts of kindness scattered throughout our lives like breadcrumbs. The elderly know that it's not the monuments we build, but the hearts we touch that determine our real impact on the world. A single act of kindness creates ripples we can't possibly foresee. The teacher who took extra time to encourage a struggling student, the neighbor who always had cookies for children after school, the stranger who offered a comforting word at just the right moment. These small gestures accumulate into something monumental over decades. The elderly understand that we rarely remember what people did for us, but we never forget how they made us feel. This truth becomes especially poignant in life's final chapters. When reflecting on their lives, the elderly rarely mention awards or promotions. They speak of relationships nurtured, of help given and received, of moments when they chose compassion over being right. The hands that have grown wrinkled with time are often the same hands that have lifted others up countless times, without fanfare or expectation of reward. There's profound wisdom in recognizing that kindness is never wasted, even when it seems to go unnoticed. The elderly smile knowingly when they see young people chasing external validation, because they understand that true fulfillment comes not from being admired, but from being loving. The quiet satisfaction of having made someone else's journey slightly easier far outweighs any public accolade. Perhaps most importantly, those who have lived long enough learn that kindness to oneself is just as vital as kindness to others. The why, ability to forgive one's own mistakes, to show oneself compassion during difficult times, to celebrate small victories, these are the kindnesses that enable all others. This is why the elderly often radiate such peace. They've learned to be gentle with themselves, and that gentleness extends naturally to the world around them. Regret weighs more than failure. Youth is haunted by the fear of making mistakes, but age is haunted by the memory of chances not taken. The elderly understand this painful truth. We regret our inactions far more than our actions. It's not the failures that keep us awake at night in our later years, but the opportunities we let slip by because we were too afraid to try. There's a particular sadness that comes with realizing how much life was spent waiting for the perfect moment that never arrived. The elderly shake their heads when they see young people postponing their dreams. Whether it's traveling, creating art, starting a business, or expressing love, because they know with painful clarity how quickly decades can disappear while we're waiting to feel ready. What makes this truth especially poignant is that the risks we fear in youth often seem laughably small in hindsight. The rejection we feared would devastate us becomes a story we laugh about. The failure we imagined would define us becomes just another lesson in a long life of learning. But the chances we didn't take, those become permanent question marks in our personal histories. The wisdom here isn't to be reckless, but to recognize that most risks are smaller than they appear, while most regrets are larger than we anticipate. The elderly who radiate contentment are typically those who embraced life fully, who loved boldly, created freely, and weren't afraid to look foolish in pursuit of what mattered to them. This truth culminates in a simple but powerful realization. At life's end, we won't measure ourselves by our successes or failures, but by our courage to show up authentically. The peace that comes with aging well isn't about having a perfect record, but about knowing you played the game wholeheartedly. This is why the elderly so often urge the young to take chances, because they know the true cost of playing it safe. Love is built daily or not at all romantic ideals. Teach us that love is something that happens to us, a lightning strike of emotion that either endures or fades. But those who have loved across decades know the truth. Love is not something you fall into, but something you build, brick by brick, day after day. The elderly understand that lasting love is always a choice, never just a feeling. This truth reveals itself in countless small moments, in choosing patience when irritation would be easier, in offering forgiveness before being asked, in showing up even when you don't feel like it. The couples who celebrate golden anniversaries don't have some magical immunity to conflict or boredom. They've simply learned to prioritize their commitment over their momentary emotions. What makes this especially profound is recognizing that love grows deeper precisely through weathering challenges together. The elderly couples who seem most connected aren't those who never faced hardships, but those who allowed difficulties to strengthen rather than break their bond. Like trees growing side by side for decades, their roots become intertwined beneath the surface, making each more resilient. This form of love requires imagination, the ability to see past temporary frustrations to the enduring worth of the person beside you. It demands flexibility, the willingness to let relationships evolve as both people grow and change. Most of all, it needs daily attention, the small acts of care and consideration that accumulate into something unshakable over time. The final wisdom here is that true love isn't about finding the perfect person, but about learning to see an imperfect person perfectly. It's not about constant passion, but about choosing each other again and again across all of life's seasons. This is why elderly couples often seem to communicate without words, because they've built something far deeper than fleeting emotion. 6. Your mistakes don't define you, your response. Does youth tends to magnify failures into catastrophes, imagining that one misstep can ruin everything. But the elderly, with their long view of life, understand that our stumbles matter far less than how we rise from them. What defines us isn't what happens to us or even what we've done, but who we choose to become in response. This truth becomes visible in the way the elderly speak about their past. Their stories aren't about perfect records, but about hard-won wisdom. They chuckle at youthful embarrassments that once seemed devastating. They speak with compassion about their younger selves who didn't know better. Most importantly, they demonstrate that redemption is always possible, that no failure need be final. What makes this perspective so powerful is its liberating effect. When we stop identifying with our mistakes, we open ourselves to growth. The elderly who radiate peace are those who've learned to hold their past with gentle understanding, recognizing that every misstep was part of their becoming. They don't deny their flaws. They've simply stopped letting those flaws tell the whole story. This wisdom is especially important in our judgmental age. The elderly know that life isn't about maintaining a perfect image, but about authentic growth. The wrinkles on their faces map not just years lived, but lessons learned. Their ability to laugh at themselves comes not from lack of care, but from the profound understanding that perfection was never the point. Ultimately, this truth leads to self-compassion, the realization that we're all works in progress. The elderly who've made peace with their pasts don't do so by pretending they were perfect, but by accepting that their stumbles were necessary steps in their journey. This is why they can look back with kindness rather than shame, because they understand that mistakes don't define us unless we let them. Endings are just beginnings in disguise. Modern culture fears endings of relationships, careers, youth, life itself. But the elderly, who've witnessed countless cycles of endings and beginnings, understand a deeper truth. Nothing truly ends without giving birth to something new. What appears as loss is often just transformation into a different form. This perspective becomes visible in how the elderly approach life's natural transitions. They don't mourn aging as much as celebrate the wisdom it brings. They view retirement not as an ending, but as a new kind of freedom. Even in facing mortality, many find a curious peace, not because they want to die, but because they've come to see death as part of a larger cycle they've learned to trust. What makes this outlook so profound is its radical reframing of change. The elderly who embrace this truth don't waste energy clinging to what's past. They focus on discovering what's emerging. A widow finds new purpose in volunteering. A retired teacher begins writing poetry. A grandfather discovers joy in mentoring younger generations. In each case, what seemed like an ending becomes a doorway. This wisdom is particularly relevant in our rapidly changing world. The elderly who adapt best are those who've learned to flow with life's inevitable transitions rather than resist them. They understand that clinging to any single phase of life is like trying to stop the seasons, futile and exhausting. The ultimate lesson here is about trust. In life's unfolding, in the universe's wisdom, in the enduring nature of what truly matters. The elderly who face endings with grace do so because they've learned that love never dies, spirit never fades, and meaning never disappears. They know, in their bones, that every sunset promises a dawn, even if it's one they won't see with earthly eyes.